I asked you guys all over social media what your top 10 Brandon Sanderson books are, and in total we had around 236 responses. Now today, I'm going to be going over those results and reacting to your top 10. Of course, I'll be giving my thoughts and opinions as well. Now, a huge thank you to my friend Patrick Ryan. He's the one who set up the survey for me and kept track of all the results and everything. Thank you so much, man. Make sure to go check out his channel. I'll have it linked in the description. Now, this is a competition, so there's a point system in place here. So whenever you guys ranked something as your number 1, it got 10 points. If you ranked it as number 2, it got 9 points, and so on and so on. You know, I just got a feeling that just like with my previous video where I reacted to your top 10 fantasy series, that I'm probably going to be very surprised with some of the ranking here. All I gotta say is that if the Emperor's Soul is not in the top 10, I'm gonna be as sad as Kaladin. But real quick, before I get into the results, the Stormfather has blessed us with a sponsor. You know, I've always wanted like an invisibility cloak. I can't be the only one. NordVPN is like an invisibility cloak, but for your data. It protects all your online information from being intercepted by various criminals that try to harvest any sensitive data you enter into unencrypted websites. NordVPN encrypts your online traffic, acting as a guardian to shield you from threats when you're online. And it's the fastest VPN on the planet. Literally with one click, you can boost your online safety. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I use NordVPN every single day. I even use it on my phone, which is why I'm really happy they're sponsoring the video, because I actually believe in NordVPN and I use it all the time. I like to know that their threat protection is there to block any links leading to malicious websites and any of those annoying pop-up ads. Their dark web monitor will alert you if any of your personal information is found for sale on any underground hacker websites. Also, I just find NordVPN really useful when I'm traveling. No matter where I am, I can connect back home and still enjoy the same content. Honestly, I would 100% recommend using NordVPN, and you can get started using my link in the description, which will actually get you 4 months extra on a 2-year plan. So go to nordvpn.com/capturedinwords. And of course, it's all risk-free. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and a huge thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring the video. It is time to go over the results, but I do want to mention that in the survey, we included Sanderson books and novellas, but we didn't include any of his short stories. However, there was an option for you to add something in, and a lot of you did add in some of Sanderson's short stories, which is awesome to see. I kind of wish we did just include the short stories as well, but I don't really think many of Sanderson's short stories are going to beat out any of his full-length novels. I don't think so anyway. We're gonna see by going over the results here. But we can't just dive right into the top 10. It's honorable mentions time. I want to go over some of the rankings leading up to the top 10. At number 37, we have White Sand. Only one of you submitted this, but you ranked it as number 4. I never see anybody put White Sand in their top 5. That is really unexpected. I do think White Sand is a little bit underappreciated. I do think it's a really interesting cosmere story. It's definitely not my favorite by Sanderson. It's not even my favorite graphic novel by any means. And even though I do agree with some of the criticisms about White Sand, I do think a lot of people don't even give it a chance. And it's one of the like cosmere stories that just isn't talked about that much. I think there's like an audio version of White Sand. I should listen to that at some point. Moving up to number 35, we have Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell. Only one of you submitted this, but you ranked it as number 1. Okay, I am really surprised about that. I never see anybody really talk about Shadows for Silence anyway, but to rank it number 1, honestly, I respect you. Mad respect to whoever submitted that response. I feel like Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, it's a long title to say, that is actually one of my favorite Sanderson, is it a short story or short stories? Novellas. Wait a minute. Okay, it's actually a novella, not a short story. I thought it was a short story. So we didn't include this one on the survey either, but I'm just very surprised that one of you submitted this as your number 1 Brandon Sanderson story. Man, Shadows for Silence Silence, as well as Sixth of the Dusk, which was ranked right above this at number 34. It had 2 submissions and had an average position of 6. Both of those novellas, I feel like, are really underappreciated and they're not even really talked about that much among Cosmere fans. And they're both so good. I really like the setting for Shadows of Silence. It's got kind of a darker tone to it. And I think it's just a really great kind of eerie short story or novella. I keep saying short story. If you're the one who submitted Shadows for Silence as your #1 Sanderson story, please comment down below because I respect your taste. It looks like book 1 of the Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians was ranked as number 33. It had 6 submissions and an average position of 9. Now, all the other Alcatraz books were ranked somewhere below that. I'll put them up on the screen here. I have never read the Alcatraz books, well, fully. I did start listening to the audiobook for the first one. I thought it was really fun, but then I got distracted with some other books I was reading, and I never picked it up again. Let me know if I should change that. It does seem like a really fun, like, middle grade series. And you know, sometimes a light middle grade series is kind of the thing that I'm looking for in between reading some other series. Okay, moving up to number 31, we have the first Stormlight Archive novella, Edge Dancer. Now, it looks like 4 of you submitted this one, and it had an average position of 7.3. I'm actually really surprised about this. I thought a lot of people love Lift. I thought Edge Dancer would be on a lot of people's lists, so I'm kind of surprised only 4 of you submitted this one. And moving over to number 27, we have one of Sanderson's secret projects. Let me know if you can guess which one it is. This one was on 6 people's list, and it had an average position of 9. And of course, this is the only non-Cosmere secret project. I feel like automatically that put it at a disadvantage being non-Cosmere, but even just judging it on its own right, I do think this was the weakest of all the secret projects, and that is the Wizard's Frugal Handbook to Surviving Medieval England. I do think this one is a pretty fun book, but it's not really the most imaginative world that Sanderson has created. The main protagonist isn't really that likable, but he's kind of made to be that way, and also it's not the most original plot. I mean, a guy waking up with amnesia in an unfamiliar place and having to retrace his steps, it's not the most original thing, but I do think it was pretty fun. It just was the weakest of all the others. If I'm being honest, I would probably put this one even a bit lower on the list. It just isn't my favorite Sanderson work. Legion was ranked number 26. It had 7 submissions and a 7.6 average position. Not many people talk about Legion, like, at all. And then at number 24, we have the next Stormlight Archive novella, Dawn Shard. This one had 16 submissions, with an average position of 8.6. Okay, I actually really enjoyed Dawn Shard. I love the characters that it follows. I liked it a bit more than Edge Dancer. I do like Lift, but I enjoyed the characters in in Dawn Shard a little bit more. Also, there's some Cosmere relevance there that's pretty important. I've talked to some fans of the Stormlight Archive who haven't read any of the Stormlight novellas. I really think you should. I don't think you should sleep on them. I think you should definitely give them a chance because, especially ideally if you read them at the right times, if you read Edge Dancer after finishing Words of Radiance, then read Dawn Shard before going into Rhythm of War, there is some really important details there. I mean, even if you just read them afterwards, it's still worth it. They're also just really fun novellas anyway. Moving on from Dawn Shard, we have book 1 in the Reckoners, Steelheart. This one was ranked number 23, and 14 of you submitted this. It had an average position of 6.4. which is actually pretty high. I'm surprised about that. The Reckoners is actually pretty fire. If you haven't read it yet, it's actually such a great young adult series. It has a really interesting kind of twist on superheroes. It's not a new twist, but it's still just the way that Sanderson explores it, I think, is really great. Basically, it takes place on Earth, and people are given superhuman abilities, but all the superheroes end up doing bad with their powers because they're human, and they end up taking advantage, and they end up turning the whole world into this post-apocalyptic place. Then the real heroes are actually just the ordinary people that are using technology and gadgets and their intelligence to try to take down these superhuman beings. So I mean, kind of like The Boys, but not really, but kind of. Anyways, it's Sanderson's take on superheroes. I think it's pretty good, and even if you're an adult, it's still a very enjoyable series. Now, all the other Reckoner series were ranked below this. I'll put them all up on the screen right now so you can see the ranking. And let me know in the comments if you've read the Reckoners, because I never really see people talking about it. Ranked number 22, we had The Rhythmatist. Again, another really underappreciated middle grade series. Now, 19 of you actually submitted this one, and it had an average position of 7.3. I'm just so happy that 19 of you submitted it, because I never see anyone talk about The Rhythmatist, and I think it's a great book. I'm still really hoping that Sanderson will write a sequel to this one day. I feel like he's got so many books to write, so it's probably not high up on his list. I would like to see a sequel to Warbreaker over this one, but one day, maybe Sanderson will go on vacation and he'll suddenly write 5 more books, and one of them will be a sequel to The Rhythmatist. It's kind of funny how that's actually a realistic scenario. Way down at number 19, we have The Sunlit Man. Please, somebody explain yourself to me. I'm really surprised to see The Sunlit Man so far down there. I feel like for Cosmere fans, there is so many interesting small details. The kind of space age stuff that we get into in The Sunlit Man is just so fascinating. I'm not going to spoil anything, but also the setting of Canticle, then the protagonist. I really enjoyed The Sunlit Man. Also, it is so action-packed right from the get-go. You barely have time to breathe. There is so much action going on. It kind of feels like one big Sanderlanche the entire time, which is amazing in my opinion. I really enjoyed The Sunlit Man. It does kind of have a bit more serious tone than the other secret projects. That could be a positive or a negative depending on your taste. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe just not enough of you have read it yet, maybe that's why, but I'm really surprised to see that it's ranked number 19. Explain yourself. Go on. At number 18, we have Skyward. I was really excited when Skyward first came out. I enjoyed the first one. I don't really remember much about it, and I don't remember much about the sequel either. I never read any more. I know the main character is Spencer. I know there's M-Bot. I know there's Doomslug, but I don't actually remember too much about it. Is it worth it to reread the two and then continue on? Let me know what you guys think. Should I read Skyward? For fellow Wheel of Time fans, these are the rankings for Sanderson's contributions and conclusion to the Wheel of Time. And of course, A Memory of Light outshines the others. It is ranked number 15. This is such an exciting conclusion. I feel like Sanderson did a really great job wrapping it up here. It's pretty much one big battle scene, which is just so epic. Ugh, my day is ruined. The Emperor's Soul did not make it into the top 10. It got ranked number 14. At least it's kind of high up there. It looks like 28 of you submitted it. It had an average position of 3.8. Okay, that at least I'm happy about. I'm happy it was in a lot of your like top 5s, but not enough. We need more people to read The Emperor's Soul. The Emperor's Soul is one of the most gripping things that I've read. It is such a great story in a bottle. It's one of my favorite things that Sanderson has written. It deserves so much more. I would love to see Sanderson like re-release The Emperor's Soul in this nice hardcover with like new artwork and stuff. That's the publicity that it needs. It needs that. But you have a copy of the Arcanum Unbounded, so go read The Emperor's Soul. Go read Sixth of the Dusk and Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell. They deserve your attention. Then you can get back to me and thank me. I will accept any and all credit. Okay, what? Again, I'm very surprised not a single Mistborn Era 2 novel made it into the top 10. I thought for sure that The Lost Metal would be in the top 10. I would probably put it in my top 10, but surprisingly no, The Lost Metal ended up being ranked number 12. Then we have The Alloy of Law at number 13, Bands of Mourning at 16, and Shadows for Self at 17. Wow, okay, why is Shadows for Self so low down there? Honestly, I would put Alloy of Law probably at the bottom of all the Mistborn Era 2 novels. I don't know about your guys' opinion there. I feel like Shadows for Self is actually pretty underrated. I'm surprised that you guys put it at the bottom. It has an amazing villain. It has a really great finale. I think it's fantastic. I do think Bands of Mourning I would put above it though. Shadows for Self is just a really tightly plotted book, but was I saying Shadows for Self? I mean Shadows of Self. I'm also surprised that Alloy of Law is above Bands of Mourning. Bands of Mourning is one of my favorite Mistborn Era 2 books. We get a lot more character development, especially when it comes to Steris, one of my favorite Cosmere characters. Also, it's a lot more fun. Like, to me, there's some really great comedic moments in Bands of Mourning. It has some more tropiness to it, but not necessarily in a bad way. In my opinion, I would probably rank it The Lost Metal, Bands of Mourning, Shadows of Self, then the Alloy of Law. The Lost Metal, I'm not going to go into any spoilers, but it has some really great Wayne moments. It just has some really awesome Cosmere connections going on there, and honestly, some really mind-blowing scenes. I know it's not everyone's favorite though. Now, just narrowly missing its place in the top 10, at number 11, we have Elantris, Brandon Sanderson's very first published book. I really love Elantris, even while I still recognize a lot of the flaws that it does have. I just really enjoyed how the magic system works, the sort of mystery and discovery aspects of the story, and I loved everything about the fallen city of Elantris. I found it so intriguing. Honestly, I feel like Elantris gets a pretty hard rap sometimes. Again, I do agree with a lot of the criticisms, but I think it's a pretty strong novel. It might not be Sanderson's best, but it's better than a lot of other fantasy novels I've read, and it's still well worth a read. And finally, we're moving on from the honorable mentions. I know that was a long honorable mentions, but it is time for the top 10. Ranked number 10, we have Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. In total, it had 347 points, 82 of you submitted it, and it had an average position of 6.8. And of course, this was Secret Project 3. Now, I really enjoyed this one a lot. I had a hard time deciding if I enjoyed Yumi or Tress of the Emerald Sea more. Personally, I do think I like Tress a little bit more, but Yumi was such an enjoyable book. If you don't know, this is like Sanderson's Freaky Friday body swap book. I mean, he mentioned that a lot of it, he mentioned that he was inspired from the anime Your Name, which if you haven't watched it, you should. It's one of the best anime movies I've seen. It also has some inspiration from Final Fantasy X, which I love to see. We know Sanderson loves to make unique magic systems. Here he makes two different magic systems, and it's really, the book really focuses on the theme of contrast, and I feel like he explores that really well. It also has a bit of romance to it, which I really enjoyed. This was kind of Sanderson's attempt at writing romance better, because that has been one of the complaints that a lot of people have had, that he isn't the best at writing romance. I do feel like he succeeds here with Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. I felt like it could have been even a little bit more leaning into the romance, but I still enjoyed it a lot. I feel like this is even a great place to start in the Cosmere. And at number 9, with 516 points, that is quite a big leap from Yumi, we have Tress of the Emerald Sea. It had 106 submissions with an average position of 6.1. I love Tress of the Emerald Sea. It took a while to kind of grow on me at first, but then once it did, I just really enjoyed it. It's such a whimsical, fun adventure. It's so different than any of the other Cosmere stories, and I know a lot of people say that it's basically Sanderson's version of The Princess Bride. It's the Cosmere Princess Bride, and I do agree with that. I think that's a pretty accurate description as far as the tone goes. Sanderson really experimented with a new narrative voice here, and I feel like it added a lot of charisma and charm to the story. This is a very tightly plotted novel, and I am so glad this was the first Secret Project because it started off with such a bang. Now, I have always been into pirates and like seafaring in my fantasy books, and here we have a dangerous sea of spores? Like what? Sanderson's world building was on fire with this book, and it has some really great memorable characters, some really awesome twists and turns, also some Cosmere connections in there that were just so satisfying to find. I do feel like if you've read Sanderson's Cosmere books, you're gonna have a lot of fun picking up on some of the Easter eggs here. I do think if you haven't, then some things might seem like they've kind of come out of nowhere in the story. However, I do know a lot of people are starting the Cosmere with Tress of the Emerald Sea, and they're having a great time starting with Tress. So I'm not against starting with Tress of the Emerald Sea. Moving on, with 675 points, at number 8, we have Warbreaker. This is one of Sanderson's best standalone novels. For a long time, it was my favorite standalone Cosmere novel. I feel like over time, it's kind of dropped down a little bit on my list. I don't know if any recency bias this has kind of affected that a bit, but Warbreaker is still a fantastic standalone, and I feel like there's a lot of potential with Warbreaker as well. If you don't know, Sanderson is planning on making a sequel to Warbreaker at some point, and I'm gonna be really excited when we get the announcement for that, because I think, again, there's a lot of potential with a sequel for Warbreaker. My mind was kind of blown just trying to understand how the breaths work and everything. I really enjoy some of the characters here. Vasher is just such a badass. I love Nightblood as well. I love the mysterious nature of these godlike beings that live in the capital city. Lightsong and Blushweaver, I love the banter between them. And Vivenna and Ciri, the stark contrast between their journeys, I thought was really enjoyable. Even though I was a little underwhelmed with how it all wrapped up in the end, I still think it is such a fantastic standalone. So I was definitely expecting this one to make it into the top 10. Okay, I wasn't expecting this at all. Number 7, we have Rhythm of War, the Stormlight Archive Book 4. This one had 765 points in total, with 133 submissions and an average position of 5.2. I'm gonna be honest here, I wasn't the biggest fan of Rhythm of War when I first read it. I thought you guys would probably vote it a little bit higher, so I am surprised to see it so low down here, but the Stormlight Archive is my favorite of Sanderson's works, but Rhythm of War, I feel like it has so many great scenes, very memorable scenes in it, but at least from when I first read it, it put me into a reading slump for a long time. It took me a long time to get through Rhythm of War. I don't know why. It could have just been something to do with what was going on in my life at the time, or the other books I was reading. I don't know, but I am actually going to be rereading Rhythm of War. I'm currently rereading Words of Radiance right now, so I'm interested to see if my opinions are going to hold up with Rhythm of War. I was just surprised at how little exploration there was in Rhythm of War. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but a lot of it takes place in one location, and I was expecting there to be a lot more exploration of the world in book 4. So maybe my own expectations kind of let me down a bit. I was also starting to feel like we weren't getting enough progression with some of the characters and their like mental illness that they're struggling with. It was just starting to feel a bit repetitive to me, like those issues were just kind of a character archetype and they weren't really growing from that. But at the same time, I mean, I know mental illness in real life, it's not really something you can easily overcome and get past. Even though it's my least favorite Stormlight Archive book, like I said, it does have some really great scenes. It has some really big reveals and some cosmere stuff going on that is really exciting. But I do feel like this is a fair spot for it. It doesn't really achieve the same highs as the other Stormlight books. At number 6, we have Mistborn: The Well of Ascension. This is the second book in the first Mistborn trilogy. Now, 148 of you submitted this one. It had an average position of 5.7. I love the original Mistborn trilogy. I do feel like this one has its slower moments, but I really love how each new Mistborn book like ramped up the stakes and the tension. And in The Well of Ascension, the main characters are more powerful, but the stakes are much higher. And just the mysteries of the world are expanded upon even more, and we do get some answers to some of the mysteries we had, or some of the questions we had in the first book. I do know some people really hate The Well of Ascension though, and I think it does just have to do with a portion of the book that kind of slows down a bit, but honestly, it never really affected my enjoyment of the book. At number 5, we have The Hero of Ages, the final book in the original Mistborn trilogy. This one had such an amazing ending. Now, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but this was one of the best endings I have read since the Return of the King. Now, obviously, everyone has their own taste. I have talked to people that absolutely hated the ending, and obviously, you're not gonna enjoy this book that much then, but it looks like a lot of you enjoyed The Hero of Ages. It's actually pretty high up here in the top 10. I just loved seeing how far these characters had come and just the jaw-dropping reveals in this book. It's just so good. I'm still not over the ending. I mean, Sanderson had so many mysteries, so many threads woven throughout the series, and he managed to pull them all together in the end, and it was masterful, honestly. He just pulled it off off in such a comprehensive and satisfying way. And also you realize that Sanderson actually gave a lot of the information for us to figure it out on our own, but you don't really realize that until the ending. Unless I'm just dumb, and that could be the case. I do feel like overall there could have been a bit more editing and trimming in the original Mistborn era, but I still enjoyed it a lot. Hero of Ages is honestly one of the best Sanderson conclusions, in my opinion. And then at number 4, we have Oathbringer. Now, this one actually had less submissions than the Hero of Ages, but it had an average position of 4.4. So in total, it had 1,039 points, more points than the Hero of Ages. Now, I have seen a lot of people that didn't enjoy Oathbringer because of around the 40% mark, where it does kind of slow down a little. Now, I personally found that part to be really interesting. I was still very invested in Oathbringer, but it did take a lot longer to read than The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. So I think that does say something about the pacing. There was a time when I thought Oathbringer was my favorite, but I'm rereading the Stormlight Archive right now. I'm realizing that a lot of the scenes I thought were in Oathbringer were actually in Words of Radiance. I think it's just because I read them back to back. So now that I'm rereading them, I'm realizing, no, Words of Radiance is my favorite Stormlight Archive book. Oathbringer, I haven't gotten to the reread yet. I'll have to update you guys with my thoughts, but I did really enjoy it the first time I read it. I do think it isn't quite as good as the first two though. So far, I completely agree with you guys on the ranking for the Stormlight Archive. At number 3, we have my very first Cosmere novel and Sanderson novel that I ever read, and that is The Final Empire, Mistborn Book 1. Now, this had 1,272 points in total, 196 submissions, and an average position of 4.5. Again, this was my first introduction to the Cosmere, and I was in love with it from the start, and I still recommend this as the best place to start with Sanderson's Cosmere. Vin is such a fantastic character to follow here. She goes through some really immense growth throughout the series, and even a lot of growth in this first book. Really, she's one of my favorite Sanderson characters. And I made an entire deep dive video on Vin recently, which covers her growth through the entire first trilogy. I put a lot of work into that video, so make sure to go watch it if you're interested. And I would really like to make more of those character studies. I'd like to make one for Kelsier and Sazed, maybe some Stormlight characters as well, but it would be great to know if you guys even want to see that content, because it took a long time. I put a lot of effort into that Vin video, and so if I'm gonna make more of them, it would be awesome to hear if you guys actually want to see that. I am just never gonna forget my first time reading Mistborn, just my introduction to this strange ash-covered world and the magic system here. It was honestly such an amazing experience discovering allomancy for the first time and how it all works. And then in my head, I was trying to figure out how Vin could use her powers in different situations before she even tried to use her abilities. And then, of course, there's just so many iconic characters like Kelsier that you're introduced to in the Final Empire. It really is a very memorable Sanderson book, and I would probably agree. I would probably put it up there in my top 3. And at number 2, with 201 submissions, we have The Way of Kings. This book is absolutely iconic. Like, it was such an amazing experience discovering Roshar for the first time. Just like with the Final Empire, I feel like this was just such a memorable experience for me. Now, right after I finished Mistborn, I dove right into the Stormlight Archive, and I immediately realized the jump in quality in Sanderson's writing. Like, I feel like you can tell that he grew as an author when he started writing The Way of Kings. And again, it's just an experience I'm never going to forget. Roshar is such a strange and alien world, and I was so fascinated learning every aspect about Spren and about, the Shattered Plains and the Chasm Fiends. I mean, I was so invested that even the interludes that do kind of feel like an interruption, I still enjoyed them because I loved learning just about different parts of the world and getting little details about the world building. Now, Kaladin is by far one of the best characters in the Stormlight Archive, perhaps in the entire Cosmere, in my opinion. And his incredible character arc in The Way of Kings is what makes me love it so much. And I also absolutely love Bridge 4. I really enjoyed the underdog aspect to this book, and just watching Kaladin slowly try to win them over and gain their trust and grow as a leader. It's truly one of the most memorable and exciting parts about the book for me. All the training, the bridge runs, and the trust building, it's all such a memorable part of the Stormlight Archive for me and such an iconic moment. Yeah, the experience reading this book was truly incredible. And at number 1, drum rolls please, though I'm sure you probably already know, it is Words of Radiance, book 2 in the Stormlight Archive. Now this one actually had 194 submissions, so a little bit less than The Way of Kings, but it had an average position of 2.9. So the people that put this one on their list put it up higher than The Way of Kings. Now I am currently rereading Words of Radiance in preparation for my in-depth summary, which is going to be going up in June. I know, it's been like years, but I finally am continuing my Stormlight Archive summaries, and I am going to post summaries all the way up to Rhythm of War before Stormlight Archive Book 5 releases this December. Somehow, I forgot how truly brilliant Words of Radiance is. I'm rediscovering that upon rereading it. I forgot how many of these amazing scenes there are in Words of Radiance. I forgot how action-packed it is. The action, the pacing, the suspense, it's all so on point in this book, and it feels very cinematic in a way. If there is ever going to be a movie or TV show adaptation of the Stormlight Archive, which I guarantee there will be at some point, the movie or season that I'm going to be most excited for is going to be for Words of Radiance. There's just so many moments in this book that I feel like can work really well in adaptation. Let's hope that they honor the source material in that adaptation. Honestly, I feel like this is Sanderson's best novel and most well-balanced novel to date, and I'm so happy you guys agree and it made it into the number 1 spot. Honestly, I feel like the first time I read Words of Radiance, I read it directly after reading The Way of Kings. I kind of sped through it and I loved it, but it was just hard for me to separate what events happened in which book. But now, as I'm rereading it, I'm really taking my time, and I'm kind of noticing even some of the foreshadowing that I didn't notice the first time. It truly deserves the number 1 spot, in my opinion. And yeah, that is the top 10 Brandon Sanderson books of all time, according to you. Now, I definitely agree. I think, honestly, my top 5 would almost be identical. I think so anyway. I should make a video where I rank all of Sanderson's books, because I did make a video like that years ago where I ranked all of the Cosmere books, but there's been a lot that I've released since, and also I should talk about his non-Cosmere books as well. Anyways, let me know if you want to see more videos like this where I'm reacting to your rankings. I find this so fun, and you might have noticed I've actually been uploading a little bit more often here, and that's only possible with the support over on Patreon and my channel members. So if you like the content I'm making and you want to help support the channel and help me be able to get these videos up more consistently, then make sure to check out the Patreon or become a channel member here on YouTube. Huge thank you to all the support I get over on there, and yeah, I'll see you guys soon.